The final type of project that you might work on that I've covered with this Let's Design Together add-on is a web application. Now, web applications are kind of complex in a sense that they're having the biggest amount of screen real estate available because you're working for most often desktop context of use. And there's a lot of like complex flows, tables, charts that you might be working on because you're working with the amount of data that's only really usable on something like a large desktop. So that's one thing. And another thing that it is kind of heavy UX type of work that you're going to be working with, similarly to how mobile apps are. So when it comes to complexity, most often like wearable apps are going to have very simple flows and they're going to be very small in size. So you're going to be really limited with what you can do. Mobile apps, tablet apps, and web apps can go from like simple to complex very easily. And then responsive websites are going to be complex, but in a different shape and form. They're going to be complex with the visual design that you have to create. And it's more oriented on ensuring really good user interface design versus the UX side of things is not as complex. And that doesn't have to be like set through it for every type of project you're going to have that's going to fit into that category of a project. But it is something to keep in mind because most often websites are going to be presentational, while other types of apps are going to be helping the users achieve a certain goal. And there is a goal with a visit on the website that you're also doing, but you're mostly consuming information and you're not creating that information, while with apps, you're going to be more in control. So just have that consideration in mind when you're looking at all of these videos and when you're working on those types of projects. For this, we're going to have to design the main screen of a web application, so desktop only, and that's going to be a common thing to do with a lot of web apps that you're going to be working on, because those are most likely going to be for a very specific scenario and context of use. So even if you're going to be working on responsive web applications, the responsive side of things can get limited at one point, and you might decide like, oh, it's actually better to build a mobile app for that use case there. So like web applications like MailChimp, you're gonna see are more limited when you're working on your mobile browser than they are on your desktop browser, for example. This app is going to be used by daycare owner and managers. It needs to allow them to manage the list of dogs enrolled alongside their owners, check and adjust attendance, allow for mass contact of owners, generate, view and manage invoices, and check the waitlist for interested dog owners. So if you'd like, you can definitely take this brief and kind of go design all of those things after you've viewed this video and after you've followed along and kind of recreated what I've created. But this brief is going to help us understand and kind of plan for information architecture side of things, and also how like the layout of the screen is going to be set up. If you're still interested in learning more about these topics, like the type of projects and everything, we do have a free 2-hour course called Introduction to Product Design, where I go more into detail on some of these things. So you can enroll for free and just kind of view the videos there as well to learn more about that. But yeah, I'm going to move on to the web app side. You can see that there is a version of this grid and template with a sidebar and one without. For this use case, I do think that we're gonna need a sidebar because the navigation and information architecture seems a little bit more complex. There is a lot of different screens that you might visit. So I'm kind of planning around having a lot of these items available, and I'm now gonna position the logo in here. I'm also going to create the entire navigation to ensure that all of those things can easily be accessible from when you actually land into this application on your browser. So in here, first thing always is probably going to be some kind of a home/dashboard option. And then for the rest of the items, you will have to kind of figure out what's needed. Good thing is with this brief, we already know what's going to be needed in the navigation, so we can quickly plan around that. And in here, I have to switch back to our styles that we have in this doggy daycare library, because on the wearable app, I was using a style that's native to designing for Apple Watch. So in here, I had to go back and kind of switch that a little bit. But yeah. This is something that you're going to be doing a lot with some of the navigational items. You might just use the bottom border or the left border and not any of the other ones to ensure that it looks a little bit more selected than just the color background that we have in here. Even though that's most likely gonna be enough, you can still kind of play around and figure out if there's another way to kind of hint that this is selectable and that this is the navigational item that's active. Sorry about that. So again, exploring this a couple of times, trying to figure out the best color combo for this and trying to see what's needed to ensure that this looks deselected and selected, what are the sizes of these elements that are needed. And you can see that right now I'm more concerned about saving space than I was on, for example, an iPad, just because the use case there was so simple. There's like one goal that this user might have in mind. While I'm designing for this, there's actually a couple of things that the user of this app might be wanting to do when they visit. So it really makes sense to allow for as much information on a single screen without scrolling versus something like a website where you're kind of in that mood of like, I want to learn, I want to scroll. It doesn't really matter if I have to scroll a little bit longer to get to all the information that I need. While in here, when I have a particular goal in mind and I know that I want to manage invoices, for example, it really needs to be simple to get to those invoices. So that's one thing that's kind of done in here. One thing that I've decided to kind of take out of it is the ability to contact the dog owners. I feel like that's an action that's not really connected to any of the navigational items that we have in here. So I actually took it out of the main navigation and I made it a prominent, visually prominent button that we have in here. And it's always going to be available, and it doesn't matter if I switch from dashboard to invoices, I can still click on that button that's going to be available in the left sidebar for me to be able to quickly contact the dog owners of this daycare, of the dogs in this daycare. So yeah, after the navigation is done, again, I think you've noticed the pattern with a lot of these videos where it takes you a while, and probably the longest amount of time is kind of planning things around in your head and kind of planning around and experimenting with the designs that you're working on. And then once you have a hang of how it's going to look and work, you really get into the flow of creating all of the other details. So don't worry if it takes you a little bit longer to get your screen set up and kind of start building some of the elements that you need. You can always reference the brief and kind of go back and forth and try to see if you've covered everything. But once you get to that point and when you have a feeling like, ooh, yeah, I know how this screen is gonna be laid out, you're gonna get a lot quicker. And that's like obviously 1/3 of these videos, or like a half of these videos that you're going through. For the first like half, nothing is really happening, and there's still a lot of space open to how things are going to end up looking. And that's because I'm still deciding those things as I'm designing, and that's what's going to happen with you. So don't worry, like take your time once you have things set in place. And especially in here, you can see me going back to a couple of these other elements and designs that I've already built to reuse those elements. And that's one reason for it, is like you're saving time. The other reason for it is you're staying more consistent to other products that you've designed in this ecosystem for the doggy daycare app that we've been working on. And that's going to help you become quicker and quicker with your iterations. So in here you can see that even though I've changed the style of these things, I'm already reusing the auto layout I've created in a different place, and I'm kind of building upon from there to create something like this. And now when I turn this into an auto layout as well, it's gonna work perfectly. So one thing that you're gonna see in a lot of dashboards is and web applications in general is you're going to be working a lot with data and stats. So you want to visually present the growth or the fall of some of these items. In here, I've set up the shadows, but they became like a little bit too harsh for the white backgrounds that I'm using. So I decided against them in here. And now I want to show the growth in the numbers. So I'm trying to think of a couple of things that someone who is an admin in this company might want to have a quick glimpse into. And one of the things that I've noticed, it might be something like how many dogs are enrolled, and compared to like last week or like a period before that, has this number grown or become smaller? And to visually present it, you're always gonna use icons and also colors like red and green to present the growth or fall into some important metrics. So in here I'm trying to create a visually balanced arrow, and you can see me kind of making it a little bit smaller, and it's not going to be mathematically centered, but it's going to be optically centered, and that's what people actually do prefer to see when you're designing. So yeah, it's taking a little bit of time to kind of get it right, but once you do, you can just copy that and kind of turn it around and change the color and make it work for this new number that you're going to have in here. So this is going to be like enrolled dogs is growing, but maybe the like I'm trying to think of what to add in here. Maybe the number of dogs in the daycare is going to be a little bit smaller today. So you know that today you might earn a little bit less as a company because a couple of the number of dogs that are here today is smaller than usual. And another thing that might be important, like there were just 9 late pickups this week. And you can see that I left the arrow like down, so the number is lower. But when it comes to late pickups, that's actually a positive thing. Like you didn't have unplanned workers that had to maybe stay late because they still had to take care of a couple of dogs that were in here later than planned. Another thing on the dashboards, and I did go wild with this one, which is not something that I would usually suggest, especially, again, like talk with your developers, see what's doable, what's not doable. But one thing I did in here is I went a little bit wild with a graph for the most popular times. So it's often something like a heat map or something that's going to show you that the amount of hours that you have available when you're working, like how filled they are with the docs. So you can see in here I played around with this graph a lot based on the auto layout settings that I've set up for myself. I can easily switch things around and make some of these smaller and larger. So usually in the beginning of the work day, you're gonna have a lot less dogs visiting and needing daycare, while as the time progresses, more and more pets are going to be left at your care. So I'm just kind of trying to replicate that in here, and I'm quickly using the input field for the numbers on top to ensure that it's kind of reflecting a pretty realistic chart for the timeline. And now I'm also using colors to be able to showcase like, ooh, that's the most popular time. So again, like visually with the colors that are used, it's most likely looking pleasing to you, but it's a really weird way to represent this. And I still need to introduce time into this, and I still need to figure out other details of what else do I need on this page to make it work. So this is still going to change, don't worry. It's looking still bubbly and playful, which is something that we had a lot when working on all of these projects that are connected to the doggy daycare. And that's because that's really relevant to their brand. So in here, I did want to maybe create like a drop down for the last 7 days to be able to change the visual representation of the graph. So in here, the default timeline would be something like I'm looking at the last week to know that maybe I actually need one additional employee to be available in the times that are the most used ones, but maybe for periods like, I don't know, 5 a.m., 6 a.m. I was trying to think of like realistic times when you would leave your pet. And I know that especially in America, it seems like there's this like big hustle culture where people are working insane hours. So I wanted to kind of represent this in the graph as well. Maybe this daycare is working from like 5 a.m. for some of those people who need to be at work at times like that. And I'm now just duplicating the same input for the time to represent also the same amount of items that I have in this graph. What you can see in here, I'm trying to basically position the time so that with auto layout, it stretches exactly from the left first one to the right last one, so that I have all of those times ready. Now, one thing that's going to happen in here, as soon as I switch to PM, a lot of these styles that I've used are not going to be enough. And honestly, when you're working with charts and graphs and data visualization, you're gonna have to use a smaller typeface than you would use anywhere else. So just keep that in mind. In here, you can see that I actually ended up having maybe too much time. Like, I really don't think that the daycare would work until 1 a.m. So maybe something like 10 p.m. might be a little bit more realistic. So I wanted to represent that in here, and I removed a couple of the items and then kind of helped add more space into this to ensure that all of these are looking good. One thing that I really disliked was the fact that they were so big and bubbly. So I ended up actually kind of not using the full width of the screen that we have. And I ended up making it a lot smaller. So in here, I actually ended up even lowering, because of the decision, I had to lower the font size that I used for the data in here. So yeah, when you're working with data, you might actually use up font sizes that are not always recommended, but knowing how this graph is looking and knowing that you're moving from time to time, the user is actually going to be able to kind of guess the time even if they're unable to like quickly read it. So that's just like a little battle of accessibility that you're going to have to ensure that everything is working. Ideally, maybe switching or making some kind of a visual distinction in the graph itself where there's like the noon separator might help you remove the AM and PM, so that can also help you fill up the space as well. And one thing I wanted to do, since we have this like left to right orientation of the screen, is maybe create a card for owner updates where, I don't know, the admin or the worker in this company can easily be notified if there is something that the owner wants changed from what was originally agreed upon. For example, like the pickup schedule changed, they have an unannounced visitor in the company, or like a meeting that they didn't plan for and they had to say late. So like, how is the daycare going to be notified of this change? And one of the ways that I saw this happening is by having a list of owner updates in here. And since that some of them are going to take a lot more text, require a lot more text, I wanted to introduce the change as well in here too. So I always, when I'm designing, trying to think of realistic use cases and copy that's going to be presented in here. I'm just not using dummy data at all. So in here, you can see me spending quite a few minutes trying to think of realistic copy and realistic situations that might happen, because I want to envision how much space I need for these messages, like how long are they going to be? Do I need to think of like 6 lines of text or just something smaller? And in here we have like Janet will be 30 minutes late for Sophie. Fluffy was not checked in as scheduled. So like does this admin want to check in with the owner of Fluffy to see if they're coming in late, or are they not coming in at all today, and why wasn't the doggy daycare notified about this? Again, auto layout, it's going to be like moving back and forth with some of the changes that you're doing to ensure that it all looks and works great. I ended up making this card a little bit smaller just because I wanted to ensure that it's not taking up too much space on this dashboard. And now we're getting to a point where this feels like, oh, all of the data that I'm going to need in here as an owner at a first glance is most likely already created. So let's just maybe think of one more additional thing to add in here. And the thing that came in mind for me, especially since we can have something like the number of pets that are in here today. And I wanted to kind of maybe see if this one needs to be selected or not. But I wanted to kind of showcase all of the different pets that are going to be in here. And I can easily do that with auto layout overlapping feature. And I'm just going to kind of create a list of pets in here so that I can easily navigate to them as well. Because most likely when you're working, you're going to be working with the pets that are inside today. So I just want to ensure that those get filled. And you can see that with a plugin, you can easily fill a lot of these photos with just one click too. And the thing that I did on the end is I made the last item in this row of dogs that are enrolled and available today. I made it a little arrow so that you can kind of go left and right inside of this slider with a gallery of dogs that are in here today. Yeah, you can see that it's looking pretty neat, and I think we covered most of the ground that's needed when you're working on something like a dashboard. So you can see how I've used the left sidebar to plan the navigation and all of the items that are needed, and I need to access them quickly. They're available in here. The main action is also available. Some of the additional settings are here on the bottom. Some of the elements in here in the cards are made with auto layout, and kind of if we need a fourth one, I think we can still squeeze in the fourth one. All of the dogs are in here in a little gallery. It's making the entire screen look very visual. Again, the graph is a little bit more playful than something that I would usually do, but I felt like the branding of this entire company kind of can make use of that playfulness and use it to make the graph a little bit more visually interesting. And then also on the sidebar, we also have some owner updates as well. And in here, I'm just going to play around with a couple of options to see if this is going to react to the grid the way that I envisioned it to. And I ended up playing around with the option of the main container that we have in here. Like, is it something that's going to stretch if I have a really large desktop or a monitor or screen that I'm going to be using to view that? Do I want all of this to stretch, or do I want all of this to be centered? In the end, I ended up actually not using the stretch feature because I didn't want this to look really weird, and you would have to move your head a lot from like left to right and to actually be able to scan everything. So I wanted to keep it consistent and contained in the middle of the screen. So that's why I went more with the decision to actually keep all of this constrained and not stretching based on the grid. So in here, even though I was first testing it out and I kind of wanted to showcase a really large screen with all of those things are stretched, I ended up decided against it. And I honestly, when I turned on the grid, I've remembered that I actually planned for this to be contained in here. You can see it in the grid, like it's not supposed to stretch. So I ended up going back and creating something like this. So I just made this work like it's supposed to. Yeah, that's all for this video. Hopefully you've learned a lot with I think it's 9 videos that are contained with this Let's Design Together add-on. Let us know your thoughts in the review. Like, is there anything else that you would like to see considered? Hopefully right now you feel empowered to use Figma and are able to use it for any type of project, and you've noticed some small details that are really specific to working that type of project, and you have a really solid grasp of Figma and everything that you can use it for when it comes to designing digital products. So yeah, looking forward to your feedback, looking forward to your notes. As you know, with this course you gain lifetime updates and access to all of those. So even if we do decide to change some of these things based on your feedback and based on the new things that are happening in the industry, you can always revisit and learn all of those new things later on. So thank you once again for learning with us, and hopefully you've learned a lot in this course.